thousands of these, and it was almost completely destroyed by Spanish conquerors. So that's one extreme case of linguistic genocide and cultural genocide. But many Native American communities, again, similar to what you described for India, were forced to learn English, or in some cases French or Spanish in school, and were not allowed to use their own indigenous languages in schools. In addition, genocide is something which can be both very brutal and very direct, but it can also be much more subtle. And so burning libraries is very direct, or preventing someone from using their language in school is also very direct. But indirectly, people were told that their language has no value, that their language is primitive, that it's insufficient, that it's not fully developed. And so they were made to feel inferior. Or they were made to feel that their language is inferior. And as a result, people would stop speaking their language because they were impoverished and they were marginalized, and they were being told the only way that you can get ahead in the world is to abandon your language, and that your language is holding you back. And so there are ideological arguments that are used with people to basically convince them on their own to abandon their own language. Those ideological arguments are false. It's not true that some languages are undeveloped or less simple or something like that, or that they're unable to express modern concepts, or that they're unable to evolve, but that's very often what's been claimed. Another thing I'd like to mention briefly is, especially coming from Europe, is an ideology that one language equals one country. So it's an ideology that resists multilingualism. People were told, if you know one language, it will prevent you from using another language. Or if you speak your indigenous language, you won't ever learn English well. And again, this is just not true. It's very well known that people who speak more than one language actually do better on cognitive tests in many cases, and even on tests of those languages, that the person who learns two languages may learn both of them together better than if they were only a speaker of one language. And so this is, I think, a really harmful ideology that's still widely circulated and widely used all over the world as an excuse to eliminate indigenous languages, native languages, sacred languages, whatever the case may be, because the argument is, well, if you know those languages, somehow you won't be able to speak English well. And that's just false. And I would argue that that also is a kind of linguistic genocide. So in terms of the repercussions of losing your mother language for the individual, community, and society at large, there's a loss of sense of identity. There's a loss of sense of dignity, of self-respect. People are made to feel that they're not worthwhile, that their communities aren't worthwhile. And so people suffer major psychological consequences from losing their mother language, on top of the obvious consequences of losing access to those traditional documents and knowledge and stories and the things we talked about earlier, the oral traditions of the communities. I think that it breaks down the society as a whole. Like I said earlier, it tends to reduce the amount of unity and cohesion and identity in that particular community. And then I think we could argue that the world in general loses because of this, that we face many problems in the world today. The more diversity we have, in my opinion, the more different societies are thinking about how to solve those problems, trying to come up with solutions. And to the extent that we eliminate languages and cultures and societies and eliminate diversity, we eliminate our ability to think about and possibly propose the full range of solutions we need to face the complex challenges in the world today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Cowell, for those insights. And what was really interesting that you shared the indirect forms of linguistic genocide, where people feel they are made to feel that their language is less than, and all the false ideologies. So thank you so much for sharing, for your sharing.
Thank you, Margarita and Professor Cowell. So, despite the linguistic genocide and the repeated attempts to suppress Sanskrit, the resilience of this indigenous language of Hinduism is explained by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. He explained that because Sanskrit, which is the linguistic wonder of the world, was created out of the magnetic field of completion, Nothing could destroy it, and nothing can kill it. And what are some of the initiatives undertaken by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism to preserve Sanskrit and the Hindu culture? For the past 27 years, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has worked tirelessly to revive the ancient enlightened Hindu civilizational nation Sri Kailasa. As part of that work, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has several projects underway to ensure the ancient language of Sanskrit is preserved and the rich Hindu culture is kept alive. And some of the ways that he's doing it is through the Kailasa's Nithyananda Hindu Digital Library, which is the world's largest knowledge center of source scriptures, original palm leaves, manuscripts, and books on Hinduism, dedicated to locate, acquire, collect, organize, preserve, spread the Vedas and Agamas, and sharing the 20 million Hindu scriptures. Till date, 15 terabyte of ancient scriptures and rare manuscripts have been collected and digitized.
And another way in which the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is preserving mother languages is through Kailasa's Nithyananda Hindu University, which is the world's largest Hindu university with extended campuses in 196 countries, with over 20 million enrollments, over 7,000 courses conducted free of cost in science of power manifestation, yoga, healing, health, and wellness, initiating and training. And today, over 20 million people express the powers of the third eye after being initiated by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. And also we have the Kailasa's Nithyananda Sacred Arts, which focuses on the revival of the 64 sacred arts and sciences, such as Ayurveda, music, dance, sculpting, astrology, and Vastu.
Thank you. And so this brings us to our third question for Professor Kowal. And Professor Kowal, based on your knowledge and experience, what would you say are the pathways to restore mother languages? And in your opinion, how important is the work that the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is doing through Kailasa?
So this is a very challenging issue, is how to restore mother languages. As you just said, it's important to document these languages and to archive them and preserve them in that kind of way. And that's one thing I've done is I've done video and audio recording of many of languages I work with, and make sure that those are preserved for the future. Because if we don't have models of the language or documentation, we can't really revive the language or restore the language. But there's more to it. People need to be able to live in the language. I think that's the single most important thing. In other words, they actually use the language on a daily basis, and it affects their thinking and the way they interact with people. And so how do we provide ways for people to actually live in the language? And so we really need to fight against those ideologies that argue that you have to be monolingual or you can't use two languages. And we really have to restore people's sense of pride and dignity about their language and their culture so that they will want to use it and feel comfortable using it. I also think we have to get language into education. That's really crucial. People need to be educated in their mother tongue in school and learn the language throughout school, reading and writing ideally as well. So I would say those are really the key factors that are involved. Also, of course, there are government policies, right? If the government is not allowing people to use the language or not providing any resources in the language, it discourages people from doing so. So I think we need to recognize that governments need to invest in, especially indigenous languages and smaller languages, which don't have the same resources as large languages, such as, say, English or Arabic or something like that. And we may need to invest more in those languages to keep them supported. And in your opinion, how important is the work that SPH is doing through Kailasa? I think this is very important. I think this is part of a movement that's going on all around the world, recognizing that so many of these languages are endangered, and recognizing that diversity is a good thing, that multilingualism is a good thing, and that we really need to make sure that as we globalize as a globe, that we don't lose the individual diversity that has made people strong through the centuries, and I believe will continue to be needed to make people strong. And so the work you're doing, both to preserve text and archive them, to bring attention to this issue more generally, and to encourage people to see the way in which language really can influence your life in positive ways as an individual, and also bring together communities and contribute, not just for the speakers of the language, but for others as well, who will receive the benefit of the ideas and information that the speakers have that they can share with others in their communities and their nations. I think this is extremely important.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cowell. And I think you made one important point where you mentioned how the government, in some places are not in support of maintaining those languages. And this is why, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has founded the Sri Kailasa Nation, a place where we can revive the original Hindu education system, which is the Gurukul, where the indigenous languages and cultures can be taught, kept and preserved, for the future generation. So thank you so much, Mr. Cowell, for your sharing.
And as we come to the end of today's panel discussion, there's a beautiful quote from the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism that we would like to share with you. He says, quote, "They say language itself is God. No, language itself is not God. Language is the prism through which you can experience God and everything. When the divine decided to enjoy itself, its own extension is language. When Mahadeva decided to enjoy himself, his own extension, Devi, is language. That is why we call in Sanskrit, the Vedic tradition, language as matruka, mother. Language is mother. Consciousness is father. Language is biomemory. Consciousness is bioenergy." And this was revealed by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism on March 6, 2013. And on behalf of the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and Kailasa Nation, we would like to sincerely thank you, Professor James Andrew Cowell, for being here and for sharing your valuable insights and contribution to today's panel discussion. It was a real pleasure to host you, and we wish you continued blessings and support as you continue the good work that you do. And as we close today's presentation on the International Mother Language Day, we would like to thank all the viewers from around the world for tuning in live and for your participation. We hope that today's panel discussion was as enriching to you as it was to us, and it is with great pleasure that we warmly invite you to join us to Kailasa's grand celebrations of Maha Paramashivaratri, which will happen on March 1st from 11 p.m. Indian Standard Time until 2 a.m. Indian Standard Time. And so on this auspicious day, March 1st, the sovereign state of Sri Kailasa will be hosting Global Conclave on Zero Discrimination Day, as well as Kailasa Om Awards ceremony. And Professor Cowell, we are of course extending this invitation to you, and we hope to see everyone then. So let us now end with the Purna Mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sarvam Bhagavat Shri Nithyananda Paramashivam Padukarpanamastu. Om Nithyanandam.
Thank you so much, Professor Cowell, for joining us and for sharing.
I think there's someone.
Oh.
Thank you very much. That was really extremely interesting.
Thanks so much, Professor Cowell. Thanks. Learned quite a lot, and I hope what was shared too was quite informative to you and helpful.
Yes, it was.